Thank you for being here, everyone. This is the Chapter President's class, part of Northeastern District's Online Leadership Academy, Phase 2. Thank you for being here. Our instructor for the evening is Alan Lamson, someone that probably all of us know, who has been a wonderful help for me, a mentor for me in getting this Online Leadership Academy up and running. And when we were first discussing the Leadership Academy and I asked him for recommendations to do the president's class, he said, me. So I said, okay. And Alan certainly knows his way around the block. He has he's been a past everything, a has been as opposed to a never was. So as including district president, international president, he is a certified contest administrator in the judging program, and he's a certified facilitator for the LOPT. That's the Logistics Operations Project Team. And without further ado, let me introduce Alan Lamson, and we're off.
Thank you, David. Good evening, gentlemen. Yep.
Hello.
So thanks for being here tonight. We'll try to get all of this in comfortably in the 2 1/2-hour sessions. If you have questions as we're going through, I would suggest there is down on the chat box, there is a place where you can click on a blue hand. Do that if you could, and David will navigate through those.
I don't want to interrupt you, Alan, but it's actually in the participants.
Participants, right.
So if you click on, yeah.
That was a test for Alfred. So, yeah, it's on the participants thing. So do it that way. Be glad to take questions. So we're going to talk about first the business of being a chapter president, and let me share my screen. There it is. Okay, so everybody can see that. So hopefully help you to work through all of this so that in your term or terms coming up, the term coming up at least, you can be as successful as you possibly could be. Let me also say that don't spend a lot of time trying to take notes on anything that's on the PowerPoint presentation. David has both PowerPoint presentations in a PDF format, and after this evening, those will all be emailed out to you. So don't waste your time trying to take down notes. But I congratulate you all on being chapter president. And I want to say, number one, I usually ask in the class, it's a lot easier when it's face-to-face, how many of you are in your this will be your first year as chapter president, et cetera. And then I ask how many people volunteered to be the chapter president. And then I ask, well, or were you the one that was missing from the meeting and that's how you became chapter president? But let me say that doesn't happen. That does not happen. You can rely on the guys in your chapter that they thought you would have what it takes to be a good president for the chapter. So doing that, my congratulations letter, the main point I want to make here is that leadership is an upfront job in your chapter. You are the face and the voice of the chapter for the next year. And the best way to do that is to start right at the beginning of the year and take charge of what's going on in your chapter. So they made me the chapter president. What the heck do I do now? When I was elected to society president, and remember that I spent two years on the board before that, plus 2 years as EVP. Was at the Philadelphia convention, and my wife Jan and I were driving home from that on Sunday, and we decided to get off the highway and do the back roads. We ended up going through Princeton, New Jersey, and somewhere in the middle of Princeton, I pulled the car over to the side of the road, and she said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Do you realize what happened this week? I got elected society president." She said, "Yeah." I looked at her and I said, "What am I going to do? I have no idea what I'm going to do for the year or two." So, and you may be feeling that too. So before we go much further, what I'd like you to do is, and I think we decided to do this with raised hands, David. We were going to, what I would like you to do is let us know very quickly, just very succinctly, what one thing, if you had one thing you could get out of tonight's session that you feel would help you, what is that one thing? And you can just either unmute yourself, there aren't that many of us, and just don't talk over the top of somebody else.
Continue.
Okay, let's hear from everyone.
Alan, this is Ron Dieter from Concord Coachman. I would feel that there would be value in how to foster relationship development, not only within the chapter, within the chorus, but beyond, in terms of a support system.
Okay.
Alan, this is Paul. This is my second year as chapter president, and I missed this meeting last year. My biggest takeaway would be how to manage or lead the choral director.
Okay.
Gerald has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, fellas. I've been around the block a couple of times before, different chapters, and the thing that I think most is to get the buy-in, to reduce the apathy sometimes, and to be a better listener.
Okay,
Okay.
I think Wayne Hackett is next. Go ahead, Wayne.
Yes, I'd really just like to hope that I follow in the tradition of my predecessor, Leo Ouellette, who's done a great job in the several years that he's been president of our chorus.
Okay, the next is Rusty Senecal. You want to go ahead?
Sure, thanks. I'm from Racing City Course in Saratoga Springs, New York. My hope is to get some sort of strategy, structured strategy to help grow the chorus. And I know that's a challenge for many choruses, but I'm in my late 50s, and there are some of us that are 50s, but most of the other guys are in their 60s and 70s. So we need a strategy for that to keep us vibrant.
Okay.
I'm just curious, Rusty. There's someone else in the chapter with a similar last name as yours. Who might that be?
That is my 18-month younger brother. And he and I sing in a quartet together, which is a really great
Yeah.
time.
That must be fun.
It is. Yep.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I guess that's it, Alan.
Okay, great. So change is a difficult thing for everybody to accept. And so understand, in most cases, you are elected to maintain the status quo. Guys probably like the chapter the way it is. They notoriously, barbershoppers don't like instant change. So kind of for now assume that you were elected to maintain the status quo. And so your personal challenge in that is how you manage the chapter. So managing is nothing more than making sure that things that have to be done get done. It's that simple. You would expect that of your offices. You would expect that of yourself. You would expect that of chairman of your committees. But ultimately, you're the one that is responsible to make sure that things get done. the best way to free up your time to lead is to become efficient about doing that and being comfortable with delegating duties to the rest of your chapter. Not only will it give you time to lead your chapter, but it'll give you time to breathe. If, as we go through this, you'll see if you tried to do everything that the president is responsible for, it leaves no time for sleep and it leaves no time for breathing. So another important thing is, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that the smart leader surrounds themselves with smarter people. So maybe you don't know how to do some of the things you're supposed to do, but you should always know what must be done and also know who can do it. Just because something somewhere in a document says the chapter president is responsible for this, take that as responsible. Don't take that meaning that you're the one that has to do it. And then as you sit here in the next couple of months contemplating the next year, start thinking about to yourself what success for you in the chapter will look like. What will your chapter look like 13 or 14 months from now? And then start thinking about how you can manage what is going on in the chapter to get them to that point. So management versus leadership. And there is a distinct difference. And we're talking in this first session about management. A good manager knows how to plan, knows how to determine what must be done, knows how to determine who can do it, knows how to determine what resources are necessary, but make sure that plans are in place to be successful. A good manager is also capable of organizing. A lot of things going on in your chapter, a lot of things going on in your chapter. Which ones need to be addressed first? Which ones do you need to put your resources towards? And how do you organize, or in some cases, reorganize your chapter to meet those needs? I know we have two guys on here from the Hartford chapter, and I know that a year or two ago, they went through and decided what needed to be done for their chapter, what they thought their priorities were, and then they went through and realigned their leadership to those needs, even to the point of renaming some of the chapter offices. Oh my God, we renamed a chapter officer so that it described more what they were trying to accomplish than the terms that we're all used to, like vice president for marketing and public relations. So a manager really knows how to organize those things. He can also make sure that everything stays in line and stays in order. One of the worst robbers of your time is not keeping things in proper order. So as a manager, make sure you keep that always at top of mind. Knows how to implement systems. Notice I say implement systems. That doesn't mean you always have to develop them. We all have some really smart people in our chapter, and sometimes we don't even know how smart they are because we don't know that side of them. We know that he stands next to me on the right and he sings baritone, but beyond that, lots of times we don't know anything about the person. A good manager conforms to the goals. So when your chapter has developed goals, as a manager, anybody in a management position should always be organizing and planning their activities to conform to the goals that the chapter has set. Good ability to assign people to tasks. We'll talk about that a little later in the hour. Also to establish controls, and we'll talk about that. How do you establish controls? We are a volunteer organization. Unlike work, somebody doesn't do their job or doesn't do it right, you can't fire them. Well, you can, but it doesn't carry a lot of weight because they're there as a volunteer. And you also know what your resources are and how to allocate them amongst everything that's required by the chapter. You also are able to focus not only your efforts, but the efforts of everybody in the chapter. And we'll talk about that. I'm not sure if it's in the first hour or the second hour, but we will talk about that a little later. So how can we define the management of a chapter as opposed to the leadership of a chapter? So we all know, if I asked you, what does your chapter do? And if I'm wrong on these, let me know. If you know other ones, it's okay. I'm just trying to do an example here. You could say, we have a great annual show. We compete in contests at the division level. We do singing Valentines. We have a float and we participate in 26 parades every year. We have great social activities and combine them with our spouses. Those are all those things. They form the nucleus of what it is that your chapter does. And I refer to that as the what. This is the what of your chapter. If somebody asked you about the chapter, you would probably start at this circle of information and start telling them about all the wonderful things your chapter does, which is great. Okay. The second thing we usually, as a manager, we usually look to is the inner circle of that. And that is, how do we do it? So that's the committee structures, that's the show committee, that's the board of directors of your chapter. All of those things are the how you do them. So I would submit that this comprises, different word than compromise. This comprises the what and the how of your chapter. This is important because when we get to leadership, you'll see how that fits in. So as president, one of your priorities is to manage all of the chapter responsibilities. And as the manager, your job is just to keep the machine running. There are things chapters have to do. There are things we're all required to do by law, whether it's in the United States or Canada. There are things that officers of the chapter are required to do by law. There are things that we all value as core values of our chapter that we want to keep running and keep operating. And so part of your responsibility is to make all of that happen. And again, just to remind you, the manager, make sure there are plans in place to get these priorities completed, these responsibilities. Make sure that the chapter is organized to be successful. Make sure it's done in an orderly manner. Make sure there are systems in place. When I don't know how many of you, when we were much younger, belonged to the JCs, but yeah, several people I see raise their hand. But we all know that one of the things they did really well was when you ran a project, not only did you have to document everything you did, but when it was over, you had to evaluate it and you had to submit that evaluation. And then those evaluations and those documents were kept. And systems that really worked were documented, and it was easier to keep them in place so that when the next guy came along, and now it's guys or gals in JCs, came along, they had what happened last year, what happened 2 years ago, what happened 3 years ago. And there's a system there, and they're not reinventing the system. They're spending more time improving the system. You need to know how to assign people to the tasks. And again, we'll talk about that. Make sure there are controls, how to allocate resources, focus the effort, and then conform to the goals. One of the important things here is you will have to conform to the chapter's goals. But the art of being president, which we'll talk about in the second hour, is how do you get them to adopt the goals you want to create as president. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So I've developed a little bit of an action checklist for presidents. And there's things that will come up that you have to do immediately. And those things usually come up at a chapter meeting. They might come up with a phone call from a member. They could come up at a board meeting. But what are the issues facing the chapter that need your board's attention? So one of the very first things you should do is start there and start making your own list of what you feel are those things that the chapter board needs to really pay attention to. If you're like every other chapter, you meet once a month. The board meets once a month. Sometimes you meet only for an hour before your rehearsal. Some chapters will spend 2.5 hours on another night to do it. But the amount of time the board is actually together is limited. So you helping them understand the issues that need their attention is important. The next question to ask yourself is, does your chapter have a direction? Are you aware of the direction the chapter is headed in, where the chapter wants to be, what the chapter wants to do, and how you'll know when you get there? And then, assuming that you do, and assuming the board does, do the members understand what the direction of the chapter is, and have they all bought into it? We'll talk about that a little bit as we get into a very brief discussion on chapter mission and vision. So a chapter statement, whatever you call it, and an annual work plan, does your chapter have one? I think those are the three immediate things you should talk about. Does the chapter have a current mission or vision statement? And does the chapter have a plan of how you're going to work the chapter towards accomplishing that mission or vision? So those are immediate things that I would suggest you spend your pre-office time looking at the next 2 months. And then as needed, it is the president's responsibility to make appointments. You are the one that selects active and functioning chairs for your committees, whether it's the nominating committee. And by the way, the very first committee that you should be appointing on January 1st is your nominating committee. Whether it's your show committee, whether it's a committee for singing Valentines, whether it's a committee to raise funds for Harmony Foundation or BHS, whether it's your marketing team, whatever it is, it's your job to make sure that all of the chairs of those are active and functioning. You can get suggestions from those from all of your offices on the board, but ultimately it's your appointment. Then more of the president's actions. These things occur pretty regularly. I don't know how many of you have a chapter calendar that lists everything that the chapter is doing. It should list all of your chapter meetings. And by the way, Tuesday night is a chapter meeting at which a rehearsal occurs. Okay. It should list all of your board meetings, the time and the location, because you should be encouraging all of your members to attend board meetings. I know a couple of chapters that have done that, and it's been eye-opening for the members. I don't know what they thought the board did at the board meetings, but it was clearly what they were doing was not what they expected, because a couple of them said, I didn't know you guys did all of that stuff. I remember that comment being made. But on it, you should post all of your chapter activities, everything, as insignificant as it is. If you know that the nominating committee is having a meeting on Thursday night, it ought to be on your calendar. One, then Joe Blow, who's on the nominating committee and forgot it, doesn't have an excuse because it's on the calendar, but that lets your members know what's going on. Also, you should be putting district activities, the ones your chapter could participate in. I would guess that most chapters don't put things on there in a normal year. This is not a normal year, like Leadership Academy. And even if you're not a competing chorus, you should be putting your division contests and the district contests on your calendar, because you may have guys that would just like to go to be at a convention. And then society activities also. This helps with our guys in the chapter understanding that there's a barbershop world out there bigger than the XYZ chorus on Wednesday night. So all of those things should be on your calendar. My question of you would be, so are you responsible for putting these things on the calendar? And my answer, I hope that I would receive from all of you is no, that your secretary should be putting a lot of them on here. Your committee chairs should have access to the calendar so they can post their own notices. This is not rocket science. It's not letting somebody have access to the calendar and then worrying about them putting the wrong things on it is a lot more difficult than letting them have access and taking care of the one or two wild cards that happen. So active chapter calendar is important to make sure. Then monthly should be a board meeting. You should try to make it as consistent as you can so that people know when to expect it. For example, I know my own chapter, our board meetings are the third Wednesday of every month at 7 o'clock. Normally, when we aren't hunkered down because of COVID, a couple of meetings before, they're reminded during the business meeting at the chapter meeting that it's coming and when it is and where. We try, it doesn't work, but posting an agenda early is beneficial for not only your membership, but also your board members. And then if there's anybody on the board, functional vice presidents who do a report, that should be submitted early for reading. It's amazing how much more productive and shorter your board meetings will be if your vice president take 20 minutes to write a report and submit it to everybody, or submit it to the secretary and let the secretary distribute it with the agenda. It's really important. And then financial reporting, that should be done monthly. Clearly, you are not responsible for doing the financial reporting. There are two jobs in this society I have never had. One is secretary and one is treasurer. And it's mostly because both of them require a lot of continuous work, and I only understand enough about the financial to get myself in trouble, so I've stayed away from that. But this tells you the kinds of things that ought to be in the financial report. And yep, there's even more. Every week, make sure that you have a program to go with your chapter meeting. Make sure you have somebody who's putting together a program. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be 10 minutes of pickup, quartet, tag singing. It could be, and you can do that. You can also do it by things such as there are programs. The society has them. Taking a deck of cards and dealing them out, and then telling all the guys that get the 4 aces, they have to get together and sing as a quartet. The only thing I would suggest is take all the hearts and give them to the bases, and take all the spades and give them to the leads, just so you get one of every part, which probably means you're going to give tenors about 6 cards apiece and baritones about 4 cards apiece, but that's okay. But make sure there's something going on at the meeting. If there isn't, it's your responsibility to make sure somebody does it. It's not your responsibility to do it. This one, consistently look forward to building your musical leadership better. If you're too small for section leaders, I would suggest you're probably not. If your section is at least 2 people, you should have a section leader. Again, this is through your music vice president and trying to get them. These are things that should be going on. And then ongoing, public relations and marketing strategies. Again, you're not responsible for it, but we'll talk about that a little bit. Somebody brought up that point about how to foster relationships, both within and outside of the chapter, and public relations is the best way to do it. Membership satisfaction celebrations. This is when somebody does something that's really great, the whole chapter should celebrate that. Celebrate it. And it doesn't have to be something they did really great for the chapter. Somebody in your chapter gets a great promotion at work. You should celebrate that, all of you. Okay? Something or somebody every week. It doesn't happen every week. Guys will understand if you force it to be every week. But anyway, but what this will do is, and this is an important point, this will cause you as the president to talk with everybody in the chapter on a regular basis. It's a funny thing when we become chapter president. Some of you have. People talk to you, you're not chapter president. People are talking to you. Oh, good. Oh, yeah. You're going to run for president. That's great. Oh, yeah. And they talk to you and they give you information. And then you're elected chapter president and they don't talk to you anymore. Because a lot of them, because they just think you're too busy and they don't want to bother you. But so the important thing is for you to turn that around and talk to everybody in your chapter. I would suggest that this is so important to me because it helps you with a whole bunch of things that we'll talk about, is in the next two months and a week or whatever we've got left here, is start calling the people in your chapter. Not to ask them for anything. Just call them up and say, hey, you guys elected me to the new president. I just want to chat with you. So why did you join the XYZ chapter? What is it you wanted to get? And then a little later, well, are you getting what you joined for? And just start having this general conversation. Find out what makes them tick. What do you like to do? I know you sing lead, but that doesn't take a lot of time to learn. So what do you do with the rest of your time? Okay, so it's a great time to do that. And I think what you'll find is that will make your manager's job so much easier, because they will develop a new relationship with you as president and you will have a better understanding of them. I know we try to take the route of, what you do at work and what you do at home, it all gets left at the door when you come into chorus rehearsal. And that's a great thing. But it's also important for you as the president to understand what it is outside that's driving them to do all these other things. It also lets you know how much spare time does this person really have. Is the amount of time he gives us on Tuesday night for rehearsal what he can really afford to give us? And then you know that you don't want to press him to start doing a lot of things. As smart and intelligent and good looking as he might be, or she, you know enough to leave him alone, unless it's on his hot button. And then you should be involved in district and society activities. I will say one of the resources is that the society is doing a great job at, as there are multiple now webinars that they have done that are all recorded and they're free. And as the chapter president, you should go in and start looking through all those titles and see what's there. And not only take ones that none of them are much over an hour. Take ones that you think might be of interest to you and might help you. And also when you find one, like there'll be one on membership recruitment. I think there's one on membership retention. Make sure you get that over to your membership guy and ask him to watch it. Great resource. And all you're doing is taking the time to provide them with the information. My guess is you could assign 6 or 8 of them in an hour to people. Just call them up and say, hey, have you seen this? I'm going to send you the link. Here it is. And it saves you having to watch 6 or 8 hours and then try to tell somebody what the content was. So that's a great, and all of the things, we're starting this now in NED because all of the things from this VerCon that we're in the middle of here are all being recorded. So all the classes that have been taught this weekend are all recorded. They're up on the website, and all of next weekend's will be. great resources for some of those things. So these are things that you probably ought to be taking a look at now. So you're part of the management team for your chapter. The three major people on that management team are you, the chapter secretary, and the chapter treasurer. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but in the slide deck, I do have a real quick summary of what the secretary is responsible for. And I think it's important that you have this so that you can see what it is he or she are supposed to be doing, and you can have a conversation with them about it at that point. You can ask the question early in the year, have we renewed our incorporation documents with the state or the province or the Commonwealth or the plantation? I think that covers everything in NED. Okay, so I put this here. The secretaries are next weekend. They will be, Steve is on. No, Steve is doing treasurer. The secretary class will cover all these and a whole bunch more, but you should have this. And there's also the treasurer. And what do they do? And I love number one, keep the chapter off suspension. That's important, and there are multiple things that have to happen, and you don't want to be the president when your chapter got suspended by the society. Trust me, there'll be somebody in the chapter that'll be mad. So the things that happen that, for example, that could cause suspension is your society for things you're being invoiced for. You have failed to file your financial statement. You failed to turn in your 990s of the federal government or whatever the document is to CRA in Canada. All of those things, and you just need to be aware that those are important. So Steve will cover all of this and more 2 weeks from now in the treasurer's class. So I would encourage you after tonight to make sure that your treasurers and secretaries are signed up for the classes, because you three guys, you can have a flat tire in a car and it'll still run on 3 tires. You have 3 tires. So make sure that your guys are fully aware of each of these things. So given all of that, and what the secretaries and the treasurers do, so what does the president do? Sit at the board meeting and rap a gavel or something. So be an active board member. Make sure that you have well-planned board meetings, that everybody's prepared for them, that things happen. There's some discussion. You can run your board meetings now under Robert's Rules of Order, small board rules, which is, if you're unfamiliar with it, you can get that document on the society website. But it allows things like somebody makes a motion, and if there's nobody opposed to it, the motion is assumed to pass. It cuts down discussion, cuts down all the other stuff that bogs us down. If there's something that requires a full vote, then you become the tiebreaker if necessary. Okay. So you're the head of the chapter's leadership team. You are perceived as being that by the chapter, and that is really what you do. You're responsible for planning and chairing all of the board and chapter meetings. Secretary, you'll see, is responsible for preparing the agenda, but make sure you've given the secretary all of the things you want on the board meeting so he can prepare it. We'll talk about the chapter's mission statement, its goals and objectives later. You are probably the prime moving force on that, and I'll explain to you how simple it is and how important it is. You need to know what everybody else is responsible to do. This is an interesting, everybody on your board is elected by the membership. So the argument's always been made to me, well, they were elected by the membership. If somebody's not doing their job, I can't get rid of them because the membership elected them. Between us and the lamppost, membership probably doesn't know that. And if somebody's not doing their job and it's really affecting the entire chapter, you could probably fire 'em. When I was district president, I had 2 people that weren't doing their job at different times. I went and had a discussion with one. I think I got his attention because he was at his summer cottage at a lake in the middle of New Hampshire somewhere. And I managed to find out where the cottage was, got in my car one day, drove up, found the cottage and sat down with him. I think he knew after all of that, I was probably serious. And he turned out to be one of the greatest officers on that board that we had. But the other one, I ended up just firing him, and he said, "You can't do that." And I said, "I just did." And that was the end of the conversation. So you got to do that when people aren't doing their job, and you've given them every opportunity. Don't be afraid to do it, but you need to know what their duties are and how they're doing. And so that's part of your job, is to stay abreast of that. I mentioned already, you appoint the committee chairs. I would suggest you might not appoint all the committees, but give the chairman help filling out his committee. If it's your committee, then he's not going to have ownership in the activity of that committee. I would just suggest that. I mentioned you're a non-voting member of every committee. If you really want to spend your life doing this all year long, you can go to every committee function in the chapter and you have a place there. Except at the nominating committee, you're not allowed to see what they do. Okay, follow up with them. I mentioned that to make sure that things are progressing. If they've got plans, the board should know what the plans are, and that way you know, and you know when the deadlines are. You get to evaluate the performance of the leadership team and opportunity to fix any weaknesses. Also, if you've got an annual plan and a budget, that should probably come up at every board meeting. How are we doing towards meeting our goals? How are we doing with money? As president, you should be the delegate to the district's House of Delegates meeting. Doesn't mean you have to go to all of them, but please, 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 especially doing it remotely like we are now, make sure somebody official is representing your chapter at the House of Delegates meetings. And then, as I mentioned before, attend training and education. I mean, you're here tonight. I thank you for that. David thanks you for that. But take advantage of all of these webinars and things that the society has. Take advantage of the training. It's offered for free, and the ones that aren't, I figured personally, I don't attend them. So now we want to briefly talk about effective chapters.
Alan, excuse me, Rusty, I have a question for you.
Okay,
Go ahead,
sure.
Rusty.
Yeah, just because I'm 5-6 years into barbershop, and can you just give me a 30-second what the House of Delegates does?
Sure. Good.
Please?
Good call, Rusty.
Thanks. Okay.
It's the best way to describe it is it's the legislative body of the Northeastern District.
And every district has a House of Delegates.
And every district has a House of Delegates. And the House of Delegates is actually the group that elects all of the district officers. So within the confines of the bylaws and operating code of the district, all of those officers function. Those bylaws and operating code are only altered by the House of Delegates. So they vote on those, they vote on the officers, motions that have to come up. For example, it used to be that the House of Delegates had to vote to approve the location of fall conventions. Okay. So those are the things that they do. They meet twice a year. Usually in the recent past, it's been at the Leadership Academy in January and then at Harmony College Northeast in August. So they meet twice a year. Now we're meeting remotely. So does that help, Rusty?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, good question. Those of us that have lived this for 40 years forget, you know.
Alan, Joel Maxwell from Beverly chapter has a question.
Yes, sir. Hi, Joel.
Yes. Thank you for taking my question. I would like to know where I can find.
You went on mute, Joel.
Oops.
You did that. Just
There you go.
Oh, okay. Where can I find a list of content that I can watch that video?
scroll over them.
I'll have to look that up, Joel. It's I can't remember the path to get to it. It's on the society website. It's under
Is it in Document Center?
I believe it's in Document Center.
That you can reach through the Member Center
Right.
or
Okay,
through
okay.
or through BHS, the main
website.
and then go to Membership Center and then Document Center. You may need to log in. You may need to use your.
You will have to log in.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, okay. I've been there before. Yeah, okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. So the mission statement, we're going to talk about it a little bit deeper later, but this will just give you the synopsis. Effective chapters have good leadership, strong leadership at both the board and the music team level. You need to have both to keep things moving. Strategic thinking, you should at least be thinking out a year ahead. A lot of good chapters are thinking 3 to 5 years. Story I'll tell you really quickly is one year at a fall convention, Nash was sang really well, and they got done singing, and they all came and they all sat in front of me, and their, I believe, director at the time, or at least a member, was sitting in front of me, one Mr. Patterson here. And when it was announced that they had won the district champion, he turned to whoever was sitting next to him and said, "Huh, so what do we do with the next 4 years of our strategic plan?" Because one of their goals was to win the district championship. So they had a plan, and they executed it. And I think it doesn't have to be that. It could be the plan is whatever you decide it should be, but it should be out a year or two ahead. And just remember, it's a plan. It's a plan. That means 6 months in, you can change the direction. It's okay to do. Programs, you need programs. Effective chapters have good programming in their meetings. It's not just a rehearsal. They do things to get guys interested and give them other opportunities. It's good programs that you run out in the community. It's all of those things together. Communication, we will talk about this. Communication within your chapter, an effective chapter, is essential. Technology, to the extent you can, effectively use technology in your operations. And then the basics. Make sure that your bylaws and operating code are up to date. I would suggest that if you're the incoming president, you get your hands on those and read through them and see if they're in line with what you would like to see happen with your chapter. And you may be operating with bylaws that are 5, 6, 10 years out of date. You also should do it anyway, because just a year ago, the society passed new standard chapter bylaws. So you need to make sure your bylaws are in line with those. Any contracts you have, ask the question, do we have a contract with our musical director? Who's got it? What does it say? Budget controls, how does your chapter manage its budget? Financial planning, how often do you get reports from your treasurer, et cetera? All of those things are just effective for effective chapters. So I encourage you to lead on, but you're going to ask, but just who am I leading? Know your leadership team and know your membership. That's why I suggested you start calling all of the members of the chapter now and work your way through that. Surveys and assessments, gather data. This is part of management. So don't ever assume anything. Don't assume that because something was done before, you should do it again. This is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So just it's a process. I'm just encouraging you to think about this. What are the things that you do really well? The chapter. What are the things the chapter doesn't do really well? What are the opportunities to improve those? And then what are the threats to the chapter if it doesn't happen? It's just that simple. So this helps you because as we talk about mission, you'll see why. Because I would venture to say that if everybody in your chapter sat down and talked about who do we want to be 3 years from now, that you would then find that there are things your chapter is doing that have absolutely no relationship to what the chapter wants. And so that becomes, and if it's one of the things that is not one of your strengths, it's sucking up resources, taking time, and it's not even to accomplish your mission. Surveys for membership can help create the mission or get direction. I would just warn you, don't do too many of them. Make them important. You can do it with SurveyMonkey. It's free. Send it out. You'll have guys that probably can't do it or don't have the technology to do it, although it's very simple. Make sure somebody reaches out to them and calls them and takes down their responses. But when you do a survey, try to get everybody's opinion. Annual plan or a signature project. There was a thing on the choruses during the VerCon this afternoon from the Troy chapter. Their whole chapter exists to sing in parades. It's great. It's their annual plan. On a good year, they'll do 24 parades. And what was it? One of them said they made on one parade, they made $3,000. So if that's it, just know what it is. Consider a 2 or 3 year plan. And if you've got an executive vice president, make sure he or she is included. And then I will tell you the statement, organizations are either growing or dying. They aren't remaining static. So think about that. And we want you to make sure that your chapter is one of the ones that's growing. So everybody goes, oh my God, not strategic planning again. I can remember going to COT schools, and on Sunday morning, after you've been there Friday night and all day Saturday, they get you together Sunday morning and say, okay, we're going to sit here for an hour and do your strategic plan for your chapter. That doesn't work. Strategic planning is a process, but I'm going to tell you, get over it. It's really not that hard to do. If you start reading all the literature, you'll think it's pretty difficult. But mission statement is nothing more than a short statement of why your chapter exists. It says that's simple. And I underline short. The best mission statements are one sentence because they're simple, they're easy to understand, and they're memorable. The vision statement is just an inspirational statement of the future for your chapter. Goals, we understand those. There's short-range goals and there's long-range goals, and then there's a business plan, which is nothing more than how to get there. I do have some references for you, really good references that help you understand the mission and vision statement. I didn't put them on here, but I will give them to David and he will submit that as part of the stuff he hands out to you. So the links will be there if you want to do that. So strategic plan just clearly defines what your purpose is and sets goals. That's all it is. Don't make it any harder than that at all. The strategic plan communicates those goals to the organization and to the outside world. Good chapters that have good mission statements, post them on their website. by doing strategic planning and including everybody, you develop a sense of ownership of the plan for your chapter. So if everybody owns it, then they participate in it. Ensures that you're using your resources, your people, your time, your money as economically as you can. Provides a way for you to measure success. If you've set up a plan and you've got a goal, it's easy to tell whether you made it or not. And then get everybody's opinion to build consensus. So the 10 steps for a strategic plan is that plan wants your chapter to be the best, be its best. The strategic plan somewhere in there should state the purpose of your chapter and should visualize the future. What are we going to look like 3 years from now if this is what we want to do? Take an inventory of the resources you have. Take an inventory of the things you do. If you prepare a mission statement, I would also encourage you to have your secretary put that mission statement at the top of every board agenda. And when an item comes up for discussion, one of the first pieces of discussion should be, does this activity that we're going to talk about promote the mission and goals of the chapter? The answer may be yes, answer may be no. But then that's a different conversation, because if it's yes, then you all want to put the oars in the water and get behind this. If the answer is no, it doesn't, then that's another discussion, because there are some things we do as core activities as chapters that we just want to keep doing. And so you need but you need to have that discussion about these things. That should always be part of it. Just determine who your customers are. Are they your members? Are they a group outside of your chapter? Who are your customers? Write down the goals, write down the mission statement. Again, figure out what your resources are, then take action. And when you're all done, like the JCs taught me to do, evaluate at the end and keep score. What is it? Well, there's the three things I always tell you, where you plan it, you do it, you evaluate it, and then you go back and start over again. But just make part of the strategic plan part of your habit as a chapter. And then this will be in the stuff you get, but where do you get help? Chapter President's Workbook. Those of you who signed up in advance for this, David emailed you out a copy of the Chapter President's Workbook. It is in the Document Center. It's an annual schedule of responsibilities. It's a list of issues that could cause suspension of your charter. Those are some of those items. Information on running your board meetings, how to prepare an effective agenda, what a quorum is, the use of Robert's rules, meeting minutes, what should be in them, what isn't in them, how to engage volunteers. We'll talk about that. Annual business planning, there's a whole section on that. And then how do you define success? What type of chapter are you? How to set goals. In Member Center, there's more information on insurance and financing for your chapter. You all pay a bill every year for insurance, but you should look to see what it covers. There's information in there about how to cross the US border for barbershop activities. Doesn't work right now, at least not the Canadian border, but it will again. Again, questions you might have on insurance, how to get a certificate of insurance. Used to be when you're going to do your annual show, you needed a certificate of insurance. You had to do it 2 weeks at a time to get it. You can now go online, put the information in, and it's back within 4 hours. How to file an insurance claim, should that ever happen, God forbid. Where to get proof that you're tax exempt. How to conduct a director's search. Somebody mentioned membership. There is an entire section in there on membership programs and assistance. Things that chapters have done successfully that I would encourage you to go in and read through all of those. And then you get help from other places. You get, believe it or not, yep, your chapter bylaws will help you. The chapter operating code. Hopefully you all understand the difference between the two. The bylaws are just that. They should be up to date. They have to conform to the standard chapter bylaws from the society. The operating code are all of those things that you do that are a little different, that really don't belong in your bylaws, but that your chapter does. You can get help from district officers. All of us are there. Trust me, if you call, you'll get responses and help. Other chapters and other presidents, chapters near you, chapters the same size as you, chapters who do the same kinds of things you do. Call up the president, have a chat with them, see what they're doing. Other art organizations in town and other nonprofits. Don't forget that all of the chapters now can have up to two community board members on your board. These are members of the community who are not members of your chapter, who you can have elected to your board to assist you. They can provide you with expertise in areas where your chapter is lacking. Get somebody who's a specialist in marketing and public relations, for example, maybe somebody who's been extremely successful in grant writing.
On that, Alan, your non-member board members can be members at large.
And they're members at large, correct.
Officers have to be members of the society.
Right. That's it for this hour. Any other questions before we take a biology break? Any hands, David?
Nope, no hands.
Don Nichols.
I have
Oh,
one.
yeah, Don, go ahead.
Don.
What did you call those relaxed Roberts rules, and how can I find those?
It's Robert's Rules of Order for small boards,
Small board.
and they are available through the society. If you go in and go to the document center and do a search, it'll tell you how to get them. There's also in there, and I believe it's in the, let me make sure. I believe it's in the chapter president's workbook. Nope, it's in the chapter leader quick guide. There is a summary table of all the motions that most of us use, and it tells you how to do it under the small board rules.
Okay, what's that in that last thing?
It's in the chapter leader quick guide. I was gonna tell you there are three David already sent out this one, chapter president's workbook. But if you didn't get it, it's downloadable from the society. Then there is this document called the Chapter Leader Quick Guide. It's a topic such as the Harmony Marketplace and how to buy music, outreach, grants processes, things about finance, chapter support and chapter leadership, etc. That's all in there. And then the third document, which I would highly suggest you download, is called The Business of Barbershop. It's about 9 or 10 pages. It goes through, this is for the presidents, secretaries, and treasurers. And it tells you every month, the first page is what you have to do every month as president. Then it tells you as president what you may have to do as things come up. And then other things scheduled throughout the year. It'll tell you as president what you have to do in January. For example, it tells you have to appoint a nominating committee. That's required by your bylaws, but it's here. And it's a great document to help you, the secretary and the treasurer, coordinate what you're doing and work your way through the entire year, 1 month at a time. All free.
Thank you.
That's a long answer to a short question, Don.
All right.
Anything else? So we're going to take what, 7 or 8 minutes, David?
Yeah. Let's plan to be back at 8:15. Take 6 or 7 minutes here. So mute yourself and we'll see you back here at 8:15 sharp.
So let me just when you get the first pack of stuff for the PowerPoint, that first slide that had the congratulation letter has all my contact information too. I meant to tell you that. Do not hesitate if you just need somebody else to bounce things off of, to give me a call if you want, or ask me questions to follow up on any of the stuff that we've talked about tonight. So my phone number, my email address, and everything is on that letter, so you'll have it. So the first hour was, as I called it, the business of being president. It's the stuff that we kind of all dread. So the second session here is what I'm calling the art of being president. This is the stuff that's fun. This is the stuff that are the things that you'll remember. So as I mentioned, change again is difficult to accept, and you were elected to maintain the status quo. But in this, your personal challenge is how to lead. And we'd already talked about the management things that are highlighted here in gray. So the things regarding leadership is, number one, give ownership and leadership opportunities to your entire board of directors. They were all elected. They all have responsibilities. Let them own some of the stuff. Let them run their portfolios. Clearly, they have to tell the board what they're doing, and that's where they'll get feedback and rein them in as if necessarily, or kick their butts to get them going as things will happen. But give them ownership. Let them own their portfolio and work on what they're responsible for. Understand not only your team, but all of your membership. This is why I suggested you call all of your members and just have a chat with them so you understand them. Know what makes them tick. Be mindful of the doors into your chapter. Some of them are open, some of them are closed. And I would challenge you to look for the ones that are screened. Those are the ones where you let people peek in, but you don't let them in. Okay. So if you want to, within your community and within potential new members, if you want potential new members or you want other people to participate in things with you, take a look at all those places where you interact with those people and see if the vision that you're leaving with them is that the doors are open to them to come in and participate with or be part of your chapter. And be aware of the screen doors, because sometimes we don't see them because we can see through them. I mentioned this a little bit, but kind of envision your year and think about where you want to be at the end of the year and keep that in front of mind right from the start of the year. Remember, you're not alone. There's a bunch of other people there who can help you. And while you're the main leader, understand you can't lead everyone. There are some people who just are unleadable. There are some people who don't want to be led. And there are some people who somebody else on your board might have a better relationship with and be able to lead them and bring them on board too. So don't forget all of those things. So we talked about the what and the how. The circle that envelops everything about your chapter is the why. It's the part we usually address last. If you were to describe to somebody your chapter and you were to say the XYZ chapter, oh, we do this and we do this and we do this and we do our show and we get this. Understand the why. Why are you doing all of these things, and make that the driving force of everything. Understand the why. That's what gets the guys excited, because they understand, or when you have something that's very successful, everybody's on board and they understand why you're doing it. Remember, we're all in this together. Try not to run your board of directors from the top. You are a member of the board. You are elected to chair the meetings of the board. You are elected to be the voice of the board and the chapter. but don't run it from the top down. Try to keep it as level across the table as you can with everybody. Remind people periodically of your purpose. That's why I suggested, if you have a mission statement or if you create one, put that at the top of your website. Put it at the top of your board agenda. Put it at the top of every piece of correspondence that goes out to a member of your chapter or a member of the community. Personally exemplify cooperation and flexibility. For some of us, that's very hard. And I understand that. Personally, I understand that. But if we understand the why of what we're doing, then your feeling of success should be that what we're doing gets to the why. And if it's somebody else's idea, and even though it might not be the thing that lights your fire, be cooperative, be flexible. Let your board of directors run with some of these things. Give them the leadership opportunity. Delegate responsibility. Back in the old days when I was a chapter counselor, I can remember going to one of the chapters and going to one of their board meetings because they were struggling. And the president said to me, well, yeah, we do this great program. I don't remember what it was because it didn't matter. We do this great program, but I couldn't find anybody who would chair it or be on the committee, so I'm doing it. I suggested to him, and I would suggest to anybody, that if you find yourself in the position where the only reason it's getting done is because you're doing it, step back and ask why it's being done. That's part of the whole creation of the mission and vision and the goals. Find out what your chapter wants to do. Clearly what he was trying to accomplish, he was doing because they always did it and nobody wanted to do it anymore. So it's time to put it to bed. It's time to get rid of it. Accept personal accountability. Nobody in your chapter, I'll get back to that, Paul. Nobody in your chapter is going to blame you for failure if it's a team approach. And things don't work out the way you would hope they would, as long as you tell the chapter exactly what happened and keep them informed. Offer help and information, and then solicit help when needed. Somebody in your chapter is running a program and they run into a stumbling block, offer to help them or to get them help, one or the other. Whatever you do, keep everybody in your chapter engaged. That doesn't mean personally you have to do that, but make sure everybody is engaged in the activities of the chapter. They at least know what the chapter is doing. And always, always, always give recognition. Volunteers aren't in it for the money. The volunteers aren't in it for anything else except a thank you when it's over. Again, we talked about management. The difference between management and leadership is leadership inspires a shared vision. Whatever the vision is that you pass to the board, that they accept and that the chapter agrees to, create a shared vision so everybody knows what it is. It's your job to keep reminding everybody what it is. Leadership provides a purpose for doing things. It promotes values. It lets people know that this program is of value to whoever the customers are. It helps you help to create change. Don't be afraid to broach new ideas to your chapter. I'll just give you one personal instance. Manchester had a situation where the guy who was the president, we knew he was going to be leaving and moving south. We didn't think it was for another year. He took over as president on January 1st, and on the 15th, the day after our annual show, told the chapter he was moving to Florida and he'd be gone in a week. There was a whole bunch of people feeling bad. The next board meeting was really terrible. How are we going to get anything done? I had been, for reasons we don't have to discuss, the executive VP, so I ended up being the president again. So I asked the music team and the membership team to get together over the next month and come back to the board meeting, the first meeting in March, with a list of things that they thought were critical to their mission as a music team and a membership team. Nobody had ever asked them to do anything like that before. So they did, and they came back, and I said, okay, and we all talked about it. And then I said, okay, take this back to your teams, narrow this down, and tell the board what the one thing is that out of this that you would like to do that would have the biggest impact on membership and music in the next year. And right away, the questions came up. Well, we don't have any money. We don't have, I said, don't worry about money. Don't worry about anything else. Just do this. And they came back and had two things that they had wanted to do for a long time. Both needed money, both needed other resources. We spent that meeting talking about where we could reallocate money in the budget to fund these things. We did it. These activities had lasting impact on our ability to perform in the community, had lasting impact on how we reached out to people to understand the chapter and to generate interest in belonging to the chapter. It cost us a big chunk of money, but the things that we stopped doing because we no longer had money for those activities, nobody ever talked about during that entire year. All they talked about was the things we were doing because we reallocated. So it was a change. Don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of trying to create change. It's part of what you've been elected to do. Doing that stuff creates motivation among other members because things are happening, things are good. It challenges the basic process. As I mentioned, if you've got a mission statement, question everything you do against that mission statement. Challenge the process that you've been doing. Empower others. Let people have, up to their abilities, the right to take on tasks and get them done in their way. Model the way. Don't ask people to do things you wouldn't do yourself, but don't do it for them. Encourage, pull at their heartstrings, encourage them to do it. So we mentioned this, we're kind of just on this table here just before January. And this is sort of your year. So early in the year, part of your task as a leader is to create direction for the chapter. Then you get a quarter of the way through the year and you start empowering others, your board members and chairs and things, to start doing things to implement this direction. Middle of the year, nudge your leaders along a little bit, keep them going, keep them working on their projects. Around the third quarter of the year, start working on succession planning. Oh my God. Get my... There we go. Keep my hand off the space bar, that'll help. If you've got somebody who's the secretary and and you should already know that they've been secretary 5 years, for example, and he says, this is my last year. I really don't want to be secretary anymore. You should already be encouraging him to find the person to replace him. Don't leave it just to the nominating committee. That's not their job. But especially those critical places like the secretary, the treasurer, president, music vice president, those are critical. And those guys should be already working, either somebody, music committee, working with somebody in the music committee to succeed as the next vice president, you got to be encouraging that all during the year, but it's really got to be happening by the time of the third quarter. And then hopefully at the end of the year, as you're all sitting around the Yule log, wassailing away, you're toasting your successes. And if you've been elected to another year, you're already looking back to the beginning of the next year to start creating a new direction for the chorus. But as I mentioned before, always begin the year with the end in mind, so you know what success will look like and when you get there. So what does a chapter president need to know how to do? He needs to know how to lead. Be able to assess the person that you assign to a job, to know that when they accept it, that they're able to do it. Select the most appropriate leadership approaches to use. If any of you have taken any of the other healthy chapter courses, there's one that talks about leadership styles. We all have a primary leadership style, every one of us, but within that, we also have the ability at certain times to change our leadership style. If you're talking to somebody and you're working with somebody who is themselves a really good leader, your style with them will be completely different than if you're working with somebody who is totally unsure of his ability to do what you've assigned to him or her to do. So you have to change your approach to the person, to the task at hand, and everything. You need to understand your own capability in that a great deal. And then you need to be able to modify your own behavior to be most effective. There are leaders who, I call them laissez-faire, and they'll say to somebody, oh, this is the job, and we need it done by June 1st. And then just leave them alone forever. And there are people that doesn't work very well on. That works really well on the other person that's a good leader in your chorus, who is independent, knowledgeable, perseveres, and can be relied upon to complete the task. Does not work on the person that needs a lot of help. So you need to adjust your own behavior and your own leadership style to each of those people. So leadership. One definition of leadership is the ability to influence the thinking and behaviors of others and direct them towards specific outcomes. Doesn't mean it was their intended outcome, but it's the ability of the leader to get them there. Or in another way, leadership is the ability to tell someone to go to hell and have them anxious to want to start the trip. So you've seen them. However, effective leadership is adapting your behavior to the performance needs of the individual or group. The overbearing leader who wants to be in on all the details and be involved with everything is not going to be an effective leader to a person who has the same intent and is for example, the chairman of the committee or one of your officers. So effective leadership is you need to adapt your behavior to match the others. So the chapter president also needs to know how to communicate. So what I'd like to do here is we're going to send you out to some breakout rooms. You don't have to do anything. Our crack technical staff will be taking care of this. We'll break you out into 4 or 5 rooms for 5 minutes. And what we'd like you to discuss is, 1, how do you currently communicate within your own chapter? What are the ways your chapter communicates? 2, which have you found to be the most effective? And then 3, why? Okay, So how do you communicate now in your chapter? What have you found to be the most effective way? And then why is it most effective? So we'll do that for 5 minutes. You'll get a 1-minute warning when your 5 minutes will be over, and it'll automatically bring you back. Anybody have any questions? Make sure you unmute yourself when you're in the.
You want someone to be the note taker?
Oh, yeah, right.
in the
Yeah,
report?
one person, please. We have a room full of leaders, so I'm not going to ask somebody to necessarily step up and lead,
Sure.
because we don't want to spend 4.5 minutes figuring out who the leader will be.
No,
But
this isn't
somebody
the federal government.
needs to take notes and report back. We will have 1-minute reports when you all come back, just what you decided.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Here we go.
I was trying to go back and because doing that thing, I lost my share screen thing. Okay, so group number 1.
Who knows what group was what?
It says when you
I
first
didn't
start.
notice the number on our group.
All right, well, all right, Bruce, you were either 1 or 3, so step right up.
All right. So,
Bruce, we were 3. We were 3, Bruce.
And
all right.
we were
But go
four.
ahead, Bruce, go ahead.
All right. 3 will go first. The last shall be first. So I'm with the Hanover chapter, and we use email, and we have a very detailed agenda for our rehearsals. Even though our music director does a great job with the agendas, only the really attentive ones look at it. And I think it's the same thing with email. And we are having in-person rehearsals as well. We have microphones and headsets that allow us to socially distance. So I think the in-person communication is more effective, but it's not as easy to use. So then Dave said Vocal Revolution is using email. They use applications called Slack and Jamulus. He said that email was the most effective for him. Anthony said they're on Zoom and they're using email, but he said most effective are wordy documents. He does what he called wordy documents to get out, but still most effective communication, he said, is verbal. And Rusty, we didn't have his voice, but he put his comments in chat. He said that email, people don't consistently read them. In-person and Zoom meetings has really fallen off attendance. He said best is in-person with a follow-up email.
Okay. Another group? Don't all jump at once.
I'll go in. Gerald and Steve and Paul were in my group. We thought that email gave a more deliberate and intentional communication. Unfortunately, it felt more like a one direction communication, a kind of a top down. Some of us developed a kind of a buddy system for those who, we have 2 members of our Concord Coachmen who do not have iPhones or email. So we assigned a buddy to them and give them a telephone call. We felt that the Zoom meeting was very effective. It provides that kind of visual as well as the interaction. Our director happens to be an IT genius, so we reach out to other members who might be having difficulty and bring them on board. We've even had members travel to a person's house, wear masks, and help them get their system set up. I think for more individual communication, the telephone is still a very effective vehicle. And then Concord Coachman, we use our website to post announcements and information. And then Gerald talked about in Nova Scotia, the Singers Mass. So we want to hear more about that in terms of the effectiveness, because they're starting to sing in person.
Okay, thank you. Next.
We were group 2. So our group, we did talk about email, Facebook and other social media outlets, the website, obviously Zoom. Some of the other things that we were that were discussed was having a tune-up sheet, basically things that like a weekly happening flyer or email flyer that goes out to the membership, to the course membership weekly, telling them kind of what's going on in that week. Our chapter in Beverly, we actually have a refrigerator sheet that's up on our website that has basically, December 3rd, we're performing here. Here's your arrival time. This is your attire. And then basically all the other stuff. What we found that was most effective though was Zoom, because people generally want to have that human connection, being able to actually, in theory, have a face-to-face conversation, although it is virtual. And I think that was it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Somebody else?
In group 1, we had 2 Hartford guys. We had Stanley from Montreal, who's been using the phone to call people. In Hartford, we send out group emails and then follow up with individual emails. Usually we get some pretty good responses. And then the last thing we do is try and call people if we haven't heard from them. We have been rehearsing once a week outside, and successful for the guys who come, but we don't get very many people to show up. Some of the wives are very protective of their at-risk husbands. And so we're looking forward to next spring or something when we can get back to some new normal, whatever it is. And Tim was in our group, but he didn't get a chance to speak, so he should have it right now. Hello, Tim.
Hi there. Here I am. The Pittsburgh chapter is a lot of stuff by emails. A lot of guys get the emails, but sometimes we'll do a phone call. Something like an email comes up real quickly. I want to make sure we get everyone gets it. I will, myself or somebody who's ever doing the email will follow up with a phone call. But email is the most productive form of communication.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so study was done. Communicate. Words, voice, and body language, all part of communication. Words are what you say. Voice is the way you say it, and the body is obviously how you look when saying it. The interesting thing is that 9% of the people who were communicated by words got the message. If you added the voice, 41% more understood the message. And if you add body language, 50% get the full message. So I think what's important here is, especially during this time of the pandemic, that just at least we can't, well, I would say Zoom, for example, allows some of the body communication, although it's just not as good as standing face to face with somebody. But certainly adding the voice increases your chances of the message getting through significantly. So I think the Zoom, that's why the Zoom meetings for the people that participate are good. I think that's why like courses like Hartford. I mean, those guys that get together, they get all three components. Stanley in Island City Chorus, he gets that 50% because he's reaching out and they're talking. I think the work, personally to me, and the biggest problems that arise is when communication is only by email, because people can misinterpret it, misunderstand it, and because they're not getting the voice inflections and they're certainly not getting any body language. So just be careful. That's why I suggested that each of you reach out to the people in your chapter and talk to them one-on-one, because at least you get through the first 50%. So effective communication, I'm going to skip right over this because you'll get to read it. Stress management. Oh, I'll tell you this, if you let it, job as president will be raise your stress levels. So there are 4 different kinds of people who are usually involved in volunteer organizations, and you need to know the distinctions between them because it'll assist you in the amount of work you have to do and what you can expect them to do and help with your stress levels. So those groups is the cream of the crop. So in the field of human activity, their leaders are rare. And what you're going to find in almost any group is that 5% will be in this category in your chorus, in your chapter. I mean, it might be 10%. This is 5% of a large group. So in a smaller group, it could be 10, but it's a fairly small number. These are the guys that can take things on. They know what to do. They model the best way to interact with people. They can get guys motivated to help them. They can explain why this is an important thing to do. They get results. These are the guys that we all have 1 or 2 or 3 in our chapters and that we rely on when things are tough. Then there's the responsible people. This is the roughly 25 to 33% of the members of your chorus. Those are the ones that if they say they'll do something, you can rely on them. They're dependable. They will engage themselves. They will provide leadership. They'll need some leadership, but they can provide leadership and with minimal supervision. This is fairly significant portion of our chapters. Then there's the responsive people. It's about 50% of your chapter. These are the ones that if you never ask them to do anything, they probably won't. But if you ask them to do something, they probably will. And then there's the inert bottom. This is the 20% of your chapter that are unresponsive. These are the guys that won't, going back to the previous communication thing, these are the guys who probably won't respond to an email that you end up having to call. These are the guys that no matter how much you push, they're not going to do anything. They come on Tuesday night and they sing, and then they get their book of music and they go home, and they come on Tuesday night and they sing, and don't ask them to do anything in between. These 20% will absorb 80% of your effort if you let them. Some people say the 20% not hurting anything, ignore them. There may be some in here in this 20% that you just, with a little nudging, you can move them up to the responsive category, but you'll never move them up near the top. And there's just nothing you can do to make that happen. But these numbers are pretty consistent. So if you take your membership and start figuring out, you can probably put people into these categories. So now if you're working with the responsive group or the first 2 groups, they're all volunteers. They're doing this out of their heart, out of the goodness of their heart. So what is it that they want? Why do they volunteer? Some of them volunteer because somebody asked them to. How many of you ever stood up at a meeting and said, we need somebody to do X, Y, Z? Are there any volunteers? You never saw it, but all their hands slipped under their butt because nobody's going to raise their hand. I would venture to say that in any of us in our lifetime with our chapters, if we had one or two people raise their hand and say, I'll do it, we'd be surprised. Or they'll do it. They'll volunteer because they believe in you or the vice president that asked them to do something or the chairman of the committee. They'll do it because they believe in that person. Some of them will do it because it's good for them, for their business or professional growth. It will help them they feel it'll help them in their job, so they will volunteer to do it. Some people volunteer just because they want the personal recognition. Yeah, I'll chair that because they think it's a high profile position and they'll get some recognition out of it. A lot of us do it because we've been given so much stuff in barbershop and it's our chance to give back a little bit. Some of us because we just enjoy things being done well and we know if we're working on it, it'll be done well. There's also the ones that will do it because they know it'll be successful and they're going to identify with success. Some of them do it because they enjoy being a leader. God help them. They want to volunteer because they want to be in the know. They want to know what's happening in the chapter. Some of them because they don't trust you and they want to keep an eye on you. Okay. So how do you get these volunteers? I will tell you this, and it's not in the document you're going to get. But if you write this down from Amazon, you can get this book. That's the title of the book. Volunteers, how to get them, how to keep them. It's written by Alice Little, Little. And I can always remember that because this is a little book. It's probably 25, 30 pages long. I use it all the time. And in it, she says, these are the 12 things you need to know about volunteers. So first of all, a volunteer needs a manageable task that has a beginning and an end and a purpose. You need to explain that to the person, what it is, if you have any chance at all of getting them to volunteer to do it. Volunteer needs a task that matches their interests. This is why I suggested that you reach out early on and talk to the people in your chorus, especially the ones you don't see very often, the ones that aren't totally involved or even actively involved in your chapter. Find out what it is that makes them tick. And if something comes along, you say, oh, I remember Bill said he liked to do this. You can go to him. Volunteer needs a good reason for doing the task. Why are we doing this? You need to be able to explain to that person why there's a really good reason for doing it. To the extent that you can, volunteer written instructions would be really helpful. Just a short, even paragraph. Here's the project. Here's our timeline. Here's what we hope to accomplish. Here's the resources. Here's what we want done. Just give them a quick paragraph. They need a reasonable deadline for completing the task. We got to remember our volunteers have other activities they're involved in. They have jobs. So got to set a deadline for it. If you've got somebody that really wants to do a specific task for you and you've got flexibility in the deadline, make sure you match the deadline to their availability. A volunteer needs the freedom to complete the task. If you give somebody what the end result is you'd like, to the extent that you know what it is, you give somebody the directions of what to do, you give somebody the deadlines for doing it, and you give them the resources, then let them do it and just check in on them. They need everything to be able to be a success. Especially newer guys, they don't know where to go for resources. And so you need to get them, or your vice president or whoever needs to get them all of the stuff they need. They need training. If it's a big job, your annual show, for example, probably the biggest thing most chapters do financially and impact wise on the community unless a person has background in theater or production and that kind of stuff, I wouldn't throw somebody in to be show chairman first thing. So what you do is you get them on a committee, or you make them an assistant chairman for a year and then ask them to move up. They need a safe, comfortable working environment, someplace where they're comfortable being, that they know they're not going to get their head torn off every time they do something. So you need to make it as comfortable for them as you can. Needs follow-up from you. It's not nagging. It's, for example, let's say you give somebody a project that's due in 3 weeks, 3 months, and at the end of and you give them a milestone for the end of the first and second month. It's not unreasonable for you to call up and say, "Hey, Bill, we're coming up on that milestone that you were going to have X, Y, Z done. How are we doing?" And they should be able to tell, and they should know you're going to be doing that. At the end, they need an opportunity to provide feedback to you or whoever asked them to do the project. They need to tell you what the good things were, what didn't work well, any suggestions they have for improvements in the future, etc. And finally, they need appreciation and recognition. You can hand out printed certificates of appreciation. You can hand out small little trophies. You can do all kinds of things that cost virtually no money. Do it in front of the entire chapter, which I understand is hard now, but you can do it in a Zoom meeting. And it's amazing. And then if you've got a newsletter that goes out to the community, put in there that so-and-so received this award for doing X, Y, Z. It goes a long way. Recruiting volunteers. When you do it, be sincere. I always tell people when they send somebody to me to ask me to volunteer for something, I'll just look at them and say, you can't shuck a shucker. So they just you need to be sincere, be genuine. If you're matching people up because you know they have an interest in it, and you go to them and say, this project came up, and Bill, I know we had this conversation, and you mentioned to me you were really interested in this kind of thing. And it just matches what we're trying to do here. And you were the first person I thought of. Make sure you're being true about that. First person I thought of when it came up. That'll help, because you're being totally sincere. Match the position with their interests. Provide clear responsibilities. Let them know exactly what's anticipated. Don't minimize it. Don't ever say to somebody, "Oh, this will probably take 8 or 10 hours," and 3 months later they're still working on it, and you knew it. Don't do that. Communicate any training and support that's available. For example, if you've got a brand new guy in your chapter that's the membership vice president, get him plugged into all that stuff on the society website. Get it to him a little piece at a time, a little bit at a time if you have to. Follow up with him, see what he thought about it, ask questions, give him as much support and training ahead of time as you can. If he's brand new and he doesn't have all of this, and it's a one-year position like vice president is, it's not unreasonable to think, give him 3 or 4 months to get himself a little bit up to speed by doing some of this stuff without putting any other responsibilities on him. Let him know why you asked them to do the job, and then tell him what it'll be like when the project is a success. Let him know what it'll mean to the chapter. So volunteers want their work to make a difference, and they want to be appreciated. Recognize them frequently. Remember, they have outside lives, jobs, families. Don't be the conflict. Work around those. They're busy people, so don't waste their time. The old saying is, if you want something done, ask a busy person. That's true, but don't waste their time and burden them with too much. Don't punish them for being successful. How do you do that? They finish a project and you say, "Bill, that was great. You did a great job. So the next project we've got for you is," don't do that. Let him catch his breath. Okay, lastly, succession planning. This is for you to push with your board. It's for you and your entire board. Everybody should be looking for the person that's going to replace them when they're done. Okay. If you've got an executive vice president, make sure he's capable. Make sure he will be a good president. If not, work on getting him training or replace him. Either one. Help each board member select and train a successor. And as I mentioned earlier, committees are the key to succession. They're the great training ground for all of this. And get to know every member and his interests. We've talked about that. Have periodic board reviews and discussions about specific members' capabilities. Have you ever done that as a board? Actually sat at a board meeting and talked about maybe 3 or 4 people, not necessarily problems, just 3 or 4 people, and talk about what the future might hold for them within your chapter. Whatever you do, succession planning, just do it. Don't get to December and say, oh, I don't know who the next president's going to be, because we don't have anybody in line ready to do that. So finally, just remember a summary of all these things. First, manage your chapter, but don't let it consume you. Make sure the people that are doing the management part of the chapter are doing it properly. Make sure it's working. And then that gives you the opportunity to do what you really wanted to do by being president, and that the chapter members really wanted you to do, is to lead them somewhere new. Don't spend your presidency in the area of management. Understand all of your members. Make sure that the desires of your members have driven the mission statement, and that the mission statement is driving the programming of your chapter. Because then if that happens, then your members are satisfied and they become better members. Construct a strategic plan that you can measure. Measurement might be in money earned on a project. Membership might be, measurable might be project was completed by a certain time, whatever that measurement is. Remember, you're the leader of the strategic plan, and you lead all the rest of the managers. But you can't lead them all. Somebody has to help you with some of them. But above all, as president, remember, you're there to inspire your membership to achieve better results. You're there to create new opportunities, empower your board members and committee chairs, motivate your chapter, and above all else, encourage all of your members. That's it, gentlemen. Any questions?
Yeah, going back a little bit, Paul had a question. You said you'd get to it eventually.
Yep.
Is there a time when cooperation, compromise, and flexibility is a sign of weakness and not leadership? Matter of degrees, question mark?
Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Well, it could be if the chapter leader, the president, is going against what is a loose consensus among the membership about something, and it could be that he's taking a different course, and regardless of what anybody else is feeling, perhaps.
Yep, that's a possibility. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
compromise and flexibility and getting a group head about where you're going is good. But if you're not accomplishing anything, or if the compromise is let's not do anything instead of doing something, then it doesn't mean anything. That's not compromise. That's giving off. Compromise means perhaps taking another path to get to the end that you've already agreed to get to. But it doesn't mean compromising away the goals or the directions that everybody agreed on in the first place.
Correct. Yep. Good point.
Well,
Anybody
sometimes
else?
inheriting the legacy of the last 6 or 7 years of a very assertive president, and then having the opposite leadership style of one of compromise and inclusiveness can be seen, I believe, as a sign of weakness rather than strength.
I would suggest that you make it explicit, Paul. Let people know what you're doing. Let people know that there's a difference, and let people know that you're still leading the chapter in the direction you all agreed to go in.
Thank you.
I think it's a matter of self-confidence. If somebody said, if you can fake that, you can do anything and not appear weak.
If you can
I
fake
think you have to be
sincerity, I
careful.
believe.
I know. That's a borrowed term.
I think you have to be careful with compromise because it leads to winners and losers. You want to seek consensus if you can get it, so they understand where the other person's coming from and where you're coming from.
Yep, good point.
Alan, if I could pop in here, if we applied all the techniques and the information you provided here tonight, then the people won't be afraid of the change, I think. And that's the worst thing. If it's unknown and the leader, the new president, wants to do this, this, and this without doing the things you just mentioned, then, they'd be kind of nervous about it, compromising and so on.
Ron Dieter from the Concord Coachman asked, hi, Alan, additional ideas about supplementing resources on a board with outside personnel.
Huh. We're talking about the community board members.
Yes.
Yeah. You first, let's just say you can have up to 2. You can have more, but I don't think we have many chapters in the Northeastern District that want more than 2 more board members. But you can have up to 2. And the intent of that was, as I mentioned, was to supplement resources that you don't have within your chapter. Or even, and that could be perspectives. It could be bringing somebody on board from the community who knows your chapter and your chorus and is able to help you understand how the community envisions your chapter and chorus, to give that perspective instead of our perspective being in the chorus, what we think the community thinks of us. So it can be even to that level. Somebody who would participate in the board meetings, they have a vote. They're actually elected by the chapter. Does not necessarily have to be in the fall when you elect all your officers. If you found somebody in April that you really would like to have on the board that they've agreed to do it, you can do it in April. So it can be for any of those resources. I know a lot of bigger chapters, for example, the Alexandria Harmonizers, I believe, have 6 community members on their board. They got permission from the society to go above 2 for various reasons. But they have one in marketing, they have one in grant writing, they have one in intergovernmental relations, because they're in Washington, D.C., and so much of what they do is tied in with that. So it can be any of those things, any at all. And if it's nothing else than helping you with your image within the community, that's certainly a valid reason.
Okay.
Thanks, Alan. Good.
I think that's it. Thank you, Alan, for an excellent session. Everybody stayed on for the 2nd hour. I don't know how many are going to stay on for the 3rd hour, but I'm not. I don't think Alan is either. But
may I please make a quick pitch here? Everyone at this meeting is cordially invited and strongly encouraged to come back on November 8th for the joint session of presidents, secretaries, and treasurers.
I've been encouraging that to everyone who's enrolled in any of these officers' classes.
Thank you.
Who did not take the officers forum, to be sure to sign up for that. And if you did not, just send me an email and I'll enroll you. It's a very easy function. Thank you again. This evening I'm going to be sending out a survey. It's 5 questions. It'll take you less than 2 minutes to fill out. It's kind of important. And I get the results. I do not know who sends the results in. It's 5 questions and an option to add a comment or 2. I do not know who sends it in, but I share all of the results and all the comments with our instructor, Alan. So it helps us in the future to make decisions as far as our planning and so forth. And I think Alan can handle most anything you have to say about his personal eating habits or the way he looks with his new mustache and beard. So
Actually, yeah, I would just say, David, these things are a learning event for me also. So I really do look forward to comments.
I do have a question though. The slideshow that you put on is very detailed. Is this something that's been evolving from, for the last 100 years or so, or what? Or is this something that you share with others?
It's evolved.
Okay.
It's evolved. There were changes and additions and changes in this time around, David. Yep.
Yeah.
Try to make it as relevant each time as I can.
Very good.
But what's great too is just seeing some of the elements from the Healthy Chapter Initiative modules that we've been presenting to the district, and including the one that I did a couple of weeks ago. And as far as leadership, empowering leadership, principles of leadership, all of these different styles of leadership, and these all tie in, and it all boils down to all of these things coming together in the chapter leaders, and especially for the presidents. And so please fill out the survey that you'll be receiving, get those things in. And tomorrow I will, after the Zoom file gets converted to YouTube, I'll send out the YouTube link. I'll send out the slide presentation, the saved chat, as well as some of the additional resources that Alan brought up during the session. So other than that, I wish you all a good evening and have a great rest of the evening.
Great job, Paul. That's a great job.
Thanks.
I just want to say, Alan, I like the particularly the sound effects with your space bar there. I think we all heard it every time you
You were killing it.
Yeah.
I was.
Good night, fellas.
Space bar doesn't have a chance.
It's a great job.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Alan.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
guys.
Great guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.